Hey, welcome back to the Field and Faith podcasts. I'm Chris Barden, and joined with me again
is Mr. Luke Detraz.
Oh, it's good to see you again.
In third person.
In third person, like your son, who talks to himself in the third person. Today, what we wanted to do is go ahead and discuss the origination of Field and Faith, and that begins with Luke's story. So I'm just going to tee it off, Luke. You know, I think you and I lived very different lives when we were younger, even though we're friends. I think we grew up very different in how things are going. He's making a nice face at me. And so you bought my brother's truck off of him, and that was your first car that you ever purchased?
Technically, yes and no. My mom actually had bought me a car for like $500 from Arkansas. And it was stick shift, and I refused to drive stick shift. So it sat in my driveway, I think, for 2 weeks, and then we sold it, and I bought that truck, which I actually forget a lot of times that I bought that truck from your brother.
Yeah. Because that was, over 25 years ago, I feel like now.
I think I was 16, 17, yeah.
Yeah. So
that was 20 years ago.
20 years ago. We're not that old.
That's not yet.
Anyways, so let's get into Field and Faith. You know, we talked a little bit about it, but I just want to give more of the details, more of your personal testimony and growth kind of growing up without a dad and what that is, knowing that like a lot of the kids that we're trying to impact are going to be individuals that have a similar story to you. And I think one thing that bonds human beings better than anything else is like shared experience. You know, going on a trip, traveling together, but also like genuine life experience and where people are, because most people will say like, oh, how can you relate if you haven't gone through it? And I think your story is so amazing, and what can draw people in and have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing is your testimony. So what is it?
Well, you know, I like to call what you just said the common bond. You know, I think especially us as men, unless we have a deep enough common bond, we won't be friends with each other. You know, I think my wife has tried to force me to be friends with her friends' husbands, and most of those guys, no offense if any of you hear this, just we never had a common bond other than our wives were friends. And if you don't like hunting or fishing or food, I don't want to hang out with you necessarily or have a long, deep relationship with you. Let's be real, you know? Especially, too, if you have a different upbringing and you understand things different. Like, I love hearing your perspectives and all that stuff, but I think unless you can have that commonality or that common bond, it's really hard to, like, join alongside people.
Great. That did not one bit answer my question.
No, but it needed to be said.
It needed to be said, because that's where your brain was, and you weren't listening. You were being a man, and you weren't listening to what I was saying. And what I asked was, let's talk about your story.
Too much, Chris.
Well, I'm trying to get back over to you, and I didn't even want to talk on this one. I even said, why don't you just do this one by yourself and just wing it? But you want me to ask you questions, but you don't even want to answer my questions.
Yeah. So, yeah, I come from a broken home. My parents got divorced when I was 3. Obviously, I knew nothing about that or understood it. But I think one of the things that's always hard to remember is like kids before the age of 5 remember stuff, whether they saw it or physically remember it. Their body and their mentalities feel it. So I came from a broken home. There was some abuse there, in not necessarily in a physical sense with my mom, but some of the other stuff that happened, and a lot of verbal and emotional abuse. So that was kind of, you know, the life that I grew up in. And I remember probably my first memory was actually that apartment that we moved into after they got divorced, which was in a terrible neighborhood. And we had, I think literally my mom to this day said she literally found the first couch she found out on the street. And that's kind of what went into our apartment. But I remember catching frogs and all that kind of stuff, which is weird to believe that we have frogs in Phoenix. Like, I went outside in the grass in the front area of this apartment complex and caught frogs as a kid.
But I remember those frogs when I was a kid. Like, they're like the big old desert ones.
Yeah.
Not the little ones, but these are like, you have to have two hands to pick these.
And they were
things up.
everywhere.
Yeah.
In the
But I haven't
city.
seen them anymore. Like, I haven't seen them probably in 20, 25 years. Either I'm just not going outside in the middle of the night, but those like big old fat frogs.
But I was like a 4 or 5-year-old kid, and like I remember catching them. So like obviously I'm not out in the middle of the night. I don't think my mom was that terrible at supervising me, but
Well, now that you tell the story, we're trying to figure out, fill in the plot holes that we really don't remember when we're 5 years old. But yeah, so obviously, I mean, picking up a couch off of, the side of the road and calling that now it's like, that's fun to do for like Facebook and like couch flipping and stuff like that. But like,
now that's a hobby and a financial means.
exactly.
Crazy to believe.
But at the exact same time, it goes into like, you grew up in a place where like dollar bills didn't get spent. I mean, we have had endless conversations about the differences of our childhood and what I got to experience versus like what you got to experience, in the sense of, 6th grade field trip, going to Catalina Island, which is a big thing in Arizona, that the 6th grade class all goes to Catalina Island, and you not being able to even like
I was
fathom that idea.
I was that one of 3 kids in that classroom that on the entire 6th grade that didn't go to that trip because it was too expensive. Yeah, while everybody was at Catalina, I was sitting in a classroom watching a movie with 2 other kids and a teacher, which was fun.
Yeah.
Great memories.
Yeah. But those types of things, I mean, when you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with a kid, I think you can look back on it, and even in all of those situations, like, what are the valuable things that you've learned that has like kind of grown your appreciation, your gratitude for your childhood, even though you have grown up a little bit harder. I think, if you were given everything you ever wanted, does that actually equate to the life that you actually want? Or does kind of that struggle produce something in you, and now you're able to invest into somebody else because you can see the benefits and the growth and the longevity of the lessons that life has taught you?
Yeah, I think the dollar is a scary thing for me because it has its negative and its benefits, because I understand how to live with little, but I also don't love it living with little. But it's also given me appreciation for, like, you can go on a camping trip and spend no money and have an amazing vacation if you allow yourself, and to appreciate a sunset and a sunrise, or time in the woods, or, I have a deep love for animals, even if, I'm a hunter and I love everything there is about animals as a whole. But like growing up, we had a lot of animals, either given to us, or I used to catch animals all the time with the sweet traps that I had, like catch pigeons and raise them. And, we had horses and goats and all that kind of stuff. So I have a deep appreciation for the natural world and a love of animals and the outdoors because of a lack of, which is cool.
Yeah. And like with my parents, like, I think my parents are like the first generation that got out of where they were, because my mom comes from a family of 8. She was the oldest of 8, and she was like the hardest working woman I've ever met in my life. And she came from a farm family, and so she was raising kids while she was a kid herself. And so like her work ethic is a reflection of her childhood, like full-fledged. And even the age that they are now, that my parents are older, she is very widely still taking care of like her sisters, and is like the mediator of things, as like her parents have gotten older. My grandpa has passed away, and there's just like, oh, who's taking care of the books? Oh, Joyce is still doing the things. Like in any organization or any like group event, my mom is like the mediator of her family. Not because of anything, but I think as adults, they would go into different roles, but it's like the family is still, what's Joyce doing? Which, you call me Joyce in a negative, and I think it's an ultimate compliment.
Is it a negative? Or maybe it's just endearing qualities that a 6-year-old should have and not a 30-year-old.
Okay. Low blow. So then let's get into this. Now, your parents divorced, but then you end up losing your father at what age?
Yeah, I was 8 years old, which I mean, I'll even throw this in there. There was even more trauma that happened from the age of us moving out to the time he died, because he was type 1 diabetic and had heart disease. So I spent every other weekend at his house, which his house was my grandmother's house because he was disabled and not capable of living alone because of his health. So the experience I had growing up as a kid, which has kind of helped me to function in high pressure systems, is watching my dad pass out or go into shock from not taking his insulin and having to feed him honey or sugar right away. And I witnessed him have a heart attack one time. So having these moments, I mean, no 6, 7-year-old, 8-year-old should ever have to experience in their life. It was a good reality check of, like, this is real life and this is death, and these are the situations that you're going to have to deal with. And it's given me a negative but yet a positive outlook on how things can go.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it always kind of fosters a little bit though. And I've met enough people to kind of see a pattern emerge, is that the things that like happen to us a lot of as a child are the very same things we try and protect our children or the next generation from, or like we have a passion to end up stopping. Like I'll never forget, Alzheimer's runs in my family. And so like from a younger age, in my 20s, I started researching Alzheimer's because almost all the men end up getting it. And so I'm like, maybe I need to figure out now what I can do to stop it. And one of the keynote speakers was a lady who was on this like board panel and talking about this research, but she was the inventor of like the detection signs of stroke. And the reason why she like wrote all this stuff was when she was like 14 or 15 years old, her mom or her dad had a stroke. And so she learned science because at her age, she was like 60 or 70 giving this panel speech. She goes, nobody knew what it was. Nobody understood, like, this is where it is. I think it's like the left side of the face begins to droop, the left arm goes numb. And she goes, she studied enough of these events and ended up finding out that this is what they call now a stroke. And she goes, I just wanted to basically prepare people for what was going to happen. And that early detection, she goes, has saved millions of people, but I lost my mom or I lost my dad. And I didn't want anyone else to go through that. So from a young age, preparing to save the next generation so that they didn't become fatherless or motherless. And so I think that's what I think is really unique about your story is when you've lost, you're now recognizing from that what can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I basically have spent the last 36 years of my life understanding why I am the way I am and trying to figure this out, which is kind of a unique thing, right? Especially as a man, I think we're constantly trying to find out who we are, and we look to heritage and some of that aspect of like, this is who I am, but like it's unique because, yeah, I lost my dad. There's not like a lot of records on my mom's side of who we are as like a family. And then there's almost nothing on my dad's side because frankly, after he died and my grandmother died, there really wasn't anybody left to talk to about like our family as a whole. So there's huge gaps of like, okay, well, where are we from? What do we do? Like, what were our ancestors like? Where were they? So there's so many of those questions. So I never understood who I was for the longest time until I started going through some of these things and understanding and starting to see like little pieces of me that were affected because of my situation, but also things that were just innate about me as a man and because of who I was as a member of like that family, right? As I started to learn stuff as I got older. So it's pretty unique. You kind of have to like search it out when you figure this out of like who you are. There's so many pieces that you need. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of this that I want people to see with what we do is like fatherlessness, man, is just like the approval of a father is what we so desperately seek out. Every single one of us, whether we think we're doing it or not, we're looking for approval from our father.
Doesn't matter how old you are, you're still looking for it.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
But because you didn't have that, did you have any other guys in your life that kind of became like that father figure for you or in different categories? Because like my dad was amazing in certain categories, but my dad never took me outdoors. My dad paid for sports. Like, he was baseball. And so all things with him, we'll go into the, like, seeking your dad's approval. My first ever coaching gig when I got and started teaching high school was I became the freshman baseball coach. And the only person that I would allow in the dugout, guess who it was?
Your dad.
My dad. My dad was the only person I allowed in the dugout as my assistant coach to, like, keep score, run them out, like, keep kids in line, do all that stuff. And I was just like I still wanted him to see, like, I was, like, emulating what he had been for me, because he was my baseball coach a lot of the times. And, you know, he would always say, it's not about winning or losing. It's about what you learn in the game and how you progress and how you grow and how you change. And, like, I was like, I could never be anything other than a freshman baseball coach, because at varsity level, they don't care if you're progressing or growing. They care what's your win-loss record, right? And I was just like, but at freshman baseball, it's like, you have no idea which one of these kids is going to hit a growth spurt their sophomore year, because we had kids who were 5'1" on our team because they were fundamentally really good. And then they hit their growth spurt was 6'2" their sophomore year.
They're awkward.
Yeah. And so, like, he's like, oh, you should have cut them. You have bigger, stronger players. And I was like, yeah, but the fundamentals on this one were better. And I would listen to that and just being like, oh, because the other thing with that is, like, I was the little kid. I was 5'1", 5'2" my freshman year playing baseball. And I didn't hit growth spurt until my senior year, because there wasn't, I think, as many growth hormones in the food back then. And, dude, like, kids are getting crazy huge way earlier than I think our generation ever did. But so I was just going to say, but I had other guys in my life that invested in me. Like, I've got, like, a spiritual father in Lenny Corliss, who you know. I traveled the country with him doing children's ministry, and he taught me spiritually how to live, which is not something my dad ever taught me, because my dad never took me to church. I've been going to church on my own since I was 12, 13, 8th grade, whatever that is, 13 years old. So what was that for you?
Yeah, actually, as I contemplate that even now, it's kind of funny of where I failed the most and struggled the most was during high school. And that was probably the only time in my life where I haven't had some sort of figure in my life, which is actually kind of unique. I've never actually contemplated that before, and literally until this very well, because, like, the first person that really did anything was my soccer coach when I think he started when I was 7 or 8, maybe even 6. It was my sister's boyfriend. And my mom basically approached him and said, the kids need a soccer coach for Luke's team. We bought a book about how to play soccer. The moms are going to teach this unless you do it. And he felt bad, so he decided to take it on. But he became kind of like that first male role model, I guess you would say, because he obviously was my coach for many years playing soccer. But then on top of that, like, we saw him around on the weekends because he was dating my sister. But then in addition, which he didn't have to do, he knew I loved fishing. He loved fishing. So he'd actually take me fishing from time to time, like take me on the boat, and, like, we'd go on fishing trips together. And it was always, like, it was cool. And I never looked at it anything more than, like, I thought this guy was cool because he was my sister's boyfriend. He was an older guy, and, you know, and so, like, that would probably be my first one. And then obviously high school was just a complete disaster of my life. But I think probably the other person I would say would be Jeff Duncan, which you know very well.
Mm-hmm.
He put life into perspective for me, that life can be fun, and also just a role model of a fun and goofy father, which I feel like I have kind of become myself, because I'm just naturally kind of awkward and goofy and like to put my kids on the spot and make them feel awkward because I think it's funny. But he kind of showed me that as what a dad can be. Plus, he invested time in me of going hunting with me, even when he was tired and didn't want to hike, and I was always going to hike farther than him. And he also kind of gave me this perspective of like how God actually works. And, like, looking at the outdoors, I literally remember sitting with him at Bear Canyon Lake, listening to him talk to my brother about God's existence, and literally talking about, like, look at the wind blowing. You can't see it blowing, but you can see the effects of it. And look at how perfect all these trees are, and the water and the rocks, like this, like, He literally just explained it so beautifully. And from that point on, I was like, okay, there's something different about the Bible and God that I need to look deeper in, and it's because of him.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jeff Duncan is a good friend of ours, who I would say he's probably the most characteristic of any Bible character is John the Baptist.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, just to give you like perspective on Jeff. Jeff is the type of guy that will do anything for a out of you.
He would do anything to get a smile, a laugh, or to like gross you out.
Yeah. I think that the memory bank includes him like eating grasshoppers, which, bugs. How much would you pay me if I ate, the heart out of the trout? I think he would, anytime he ever cleaned a fish, I think he always ate the heart. Like he would like put it on his tongue while it was still beating or something like that.
Same thing with quail. He'd take whatever was out of their gizzard and eat it.
Yeah.
Just to gross people out, especially first-time hunters. He loves screwing with them.
Yeah. But I think it also showed you those like, well, okay. His personality though was always like the loving, caring teddy bear of a man. And he looked like he could be a little bit harsh and like violent, but like the most kind-hearted human being on the planet. And, I could say, if he was a mentor, he's a friend of mine. I never had him as like a mentor or anything like that. But to have that kind of personality in your life, I mean, change a lot.
To give you guys perspective of what he like dresses like at church sometimes, he'd wear his Raiders jersey. He'd wear snake boots, like boots that you'd wear for hunting that would prevent you from getting bit by snake, with sweat shorts on and like a Russian fur cap.
Yes.
That's a great picture of what
Jeff Duncan
dresses and his personality.
And I think he's actually at the church that we used to go to, the shelter. I think he actually preached in a similar outfit just probably. Because he wanted to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Because that's what he was comfortable in. But he broke down. I mean, we'll have to have him on because his testimony is awesome. All right. So we've talked about Jeff. So I was kind of thinking on this is, I think a lot of the times when we are with these kids, and it just dawned on me, like, we are not trying to change these kids right away. We're not oblivious to the fact that, we're going to eradicate all the hurt, all the pain, all the trauma of individuals' lives. But a mentor can change. Like, I think when I look back on my own life and look at different weeks or months or camps that I've been to, and the individuals and the mentors and the adults and the men that have invested in me, I realize that there's those the moments that kind of give you the life lessons, the teachings to handle life's complications.
Yeah, I think, that's true, because it's about individual moments, right? Because it's something that these kids or anybody really can grasp. Like if they could take a tangible word or a sentence that they can carry with them. Like I recently just did this teen foster camp, which was crazy, amazing and difficult at the same time. But I was talking to one of the mentors there, and this guy had put something on this kid, like when he was leaving, he like asked him a question and said something like along the lines of like, "I'm proud of you and I love you." And we're talking about a kid that came from a group home that doesn't understand what love is or what a father looks like. For this kid to come back in the following year, and the first thing he did when he got off the bus was say to this guy, "Did you actually mean that when you said that?" This kid held on to that question for a full year. Went back to his group home, never saw this guy for an entire year or was part of any other activities, got off that bus and held on to that sentence so deeply that he had to ask that question the second he saw him a year later. Like that's the impact that we can make on these kids, that you can literally leave them with a sentence or a word or a phrase that they can take with them for a lifetime, that they're in a circumstance or in a place that they can look back on and go, "I remember when he said this, that I am bigger than this, or I'm important and I have a purpose." That's what it's really about, man. Like it's not, yeah, we get to hang out with these kids and they get to see something once a month and be part of an experience and, get to hang out with friends and brothers. But we're really just planting a seed, and however that seed may go, that's God's work.
Yeah, and I'm just hoping though, like I'm just thinking, like, man, like if I was a kid just waiting for a year for that response, like that, like what that would be like. But like what I like that what we're doing is we're not making them having to wait a year. We're trying to do monthly events to where it's just like, oh, if you got a question, we'll see you in a month. This is what we're gonna do this next time, which gives a little bit more of a longevity for the bigger trips that we are eventually going to kind of set ourselves into. But dude, I totally agree with the idea that, you know, I think we get these little bits of wisdom and you might say it to a kid and you'll never realize like how much it really impacts them. And then they come back to you a year, 2 years later, be like, hey, remember that one time you said this to me? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Man, that changed my life. Awesome. But I think the idea of the goal is to consistently be a positive influence so that, one day they look back and go like, oh man, these two guys, Luke invested. Oh, that dude changed my life. That dude, picked me up when I was low or, made me feel loved, made me feel appreciated in a time I'd never had anyone say anything or do anything for me.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about the impact. Like, if you could even think about it like this, like, who knows what Billy Graham's mentor or somebody in Billy Graham's life, maybe somebody said to him, like, hey, I believe in you and you're going to speak great words someday. What if he held on to that because of that one person, right? We might not actually see the full impact of what these kids become in the future, but just knowing like we're feeding into them and we're doing what we're supposed to and what we're called to, who knows the effect that these kids are going to have on their own families, on their own communities. It's crazy what could be done.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to now toss it back over to you because we want to end every single one of these with a camping or a hunting story. And you seem like you've got one like ready to rock, ready to roll.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the story, I think yesterday. It was my story that got me into archery. So we were at Unit 8. I was on a mule deer hunt, and it was awful because didn't see anything pre-scouting. Still went to the area, hunted like crazy, didn't see anything. We were camped behind this giant mountain that was all pine trees. So I got real bored one day and decided I'm just going to go wander into this wilderness and see what happens. And of course, this was early on in my hunting career, so I was still easily getting frustrated with not seeing anything and not getting anything. So I wandered in, and out of frustration, after about walking 2 miles, I just sat down. Just sat there and contemplated life and was just like, you know what? This is dumb. I don't know why. I think I do this every 5 years. Why do I even do this? Like,
what do you mean every 5 years? Anytime we ever go hunting and it's 3 a.m. and we're walking up a mountain in the middle of the night and it's freezing cold, I'm like, why am I out here?
That doesn't get your juices flowing. I don't know what does, man.
Well, it doesn't get my juices flowing because I'm not going to name names, but there are some people who breathe really heavy because they're not in great shape. And so going up the mountain, I'm at the top looking down, saying, and be like, well, we're not going to shoot anything because they're definitely hearing someone breathe behind us because it sounds like a freaking bull coming up the mountain.
Oh, man. And then we have one friend that's deaf and you can hear us. Sounds like a Clydesdale climbing up the mountain. But anyways.
Because he can't really, he shuffles his feet on the ground because he can't hear it. It's like just...
I'll save that hunting story for another time. But yeah, I sat down in frustration. I was just like, I'm gonna sit here. I think I was probably eating an Uncrustable. I sat there for like 30 minutes just staring off into the distance, and all of a sudden I hear something running from my left. So I get my gun ready and I'm like, this has got to be a deer. And sure enough, it wasn't a deer. But it was a flock of turkeys, and that was the first time I'd ever seen turkeys in the wild on a hunt. And I was like, okay, this is pretty awesome. If I just sit still and do nothing, stuff happens. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get up and walk. So I got up and walked, and I found this game trail, and I started walking real slow, like take 1 or 2 steps and then stop. And then I kept going down this trail, looking to my left, looking to my right, because there's like washes on either side, ravines. And I get to this spot, I'm looking to the left because I kept thinking I was hearing something. And then all of a sudden I hear a crash very close in front of me. And of course, I'm terrified. I stop moving and I slowly turn and look. And there is a massive 6x6 bull elk 25 yards away, standing there, staring through me. Because, of course, I'm in full camo. I was doing face paint at the time. And, like, he's just staring through me, trying to figure out what was walking down his trail. And I didn't realize he was sleeping in the tree underneath this trail right here. And so, literally, he's 25 yards in front of me, staring through me. And I feel like we're having, like, this Mexican standoff for, like, a half hour. It was really, like, 5 minutes. And I was just like, holy cow, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And then he just looked away, realized there was nothing there, and then slowly just walked out of there like nothing happened. And I was just like, okay, if this is what archers get to experience every time hunting animals, I want to get this close every single time. And it was like the coolest experience. And after that, I literally went home. I think I bought a bow, and then I've been bow hunting ever since.
And how many...
Shut up.
Okay. Because I don't know how many times we've gone out or you've gone out. And then I'll just say this. I remember the last time because you had just gotten your Jeep and you had gone out for almost like a week every single morning to go out and look. And then we were going to go ride in the Jeep, your wife and my wife. And I looked at you and I was like, hey, dude, I think you should bring your bow. No, I don't want to bang it around in the back, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, just put it at our feet. No, I don't want to. And what do we end up seeing?
A nice little buck walk right in front of us in the car. Yeah.
You could have literally gotten out and chased the thing. And you allowed it like probably 10, 15 hours of walking that week, didn't see anything.
10 or 15 hours. That was like 2 days.
Oh,
I walked like 6 miles the day before.
But that right there is like, that's hunting in Arizona. I mean, I think it's one of the most difficult places in the world to literally hunt. But anytime we go camping, it's like, man, there are so many elk out here. And then hunting season rolls around.
There are so many people here.
Exactly. Like, oh, this is a spot. Nobody ever goes there. There's four-wheeler. So it's, yeah.
Please stop stealing my spots, people.
Exactly. Don't tell them where your spots are. So, all right, man, Luke, thank you so much for sharing all this. If you guys like what you guys heard today, like, share, subscribe. We're sharing hunting stories. We're sharing our faith. We're sharing mentorship. We're sharing our passion to impact people's lives and make this world a better place by being what?
Fathers to the fatherless.
That's it. And so we thank you guys. Like, subscribe, and we'll check you on the next episode.
Peace out.